AS level, graphs of functions, exam preparation questions, part 1. You will find this in the grade 12 AS-Level Mathematics textbook, Y equals mx+c to success. And you will find it from page 96. Now, I just took out a few of the summaries from the book. Now, first, what is a one-to-one function? That is, if every input is having its own output. Okay, and it's usually like a straight line. So for every x value, there's only one y value. How can you do the test? If you draw a horizontal line, then it will only cut that graph one time. Okay, what is a many-to-one function? Can you see? So for two x values go to the same y value. So two x values go to the same y value. Okay, then it's a many-to-one function. So if you do the horizontal line test, it will cut the graph not only one time, but it will cut the graph 2 times. Okay, now you can make a many-to-one function a one-to-one function by restricting the domain. Say, for example, you just take that side to the turning point, or you take this side. Okay, so it can be, because usually this is now the example of a quadratic equation, you can restrict the domain and make it a one-to-one function. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Now, also functions, inverse functions, it's where we make that f to the power -1x. Okay, and I'll show you an example. How do we do that? Just remember, if this is the function, then this domain will become the inverse function's range. And this range will become this domain. Very powerful. Okay, and I'll show you in examples. And if you the graph of the two inverse, so if this is the function and this is the inverse, it will be a reflection in the line y equals x. Okay, so the range of the inverse function is equal to the restricted domain of the original function. Okay, it's just showing you there. And then the last thing, which we're also going to work with, is composite functions. So it's two functions where you put the one function into the other function. So you're going to take the second one here, the second one, and you're going to put it into G. That's basically what's going to happen. Okay, so if this is the function and they say f, so look, the one that stands to x or a number, and then it's almost good that you make a circle around it, and we're going to throw it in that place of x. Okay, and that is what I showed you there. Okay, so this is f, so if I substitute the number 9, then I can just throw it in there and I'm going to get 81. That's if there's a number. Okay, so we're first going to do the one closest to 4, and then that answer, which is actually, the answer is going to be the range. We are going to substitute it as the domain in G, but I'll come to that more in detail. Okay. Let's look at the first example. Now, especially in functions, I think sometimes we try to make it more difficult than it's really. So I'm going to show you a few basic moves, and I'll show you that it's actually the same thing that they keep on repeating and asking in this kind of questions. Okay, but let's start with it. Function f and g are defined, and they just put it in the other form. Okay. Take note, these restrictions. Do you see the restrictions? So this is a quadratic, but x is smaller and equal to -1. This is a straight line, but x is bigger and equal to -1. So very important, because that is the domain. So remember, the x values is always the domain of that functions. Okay. Now, express f, they love asking it here in the form, and we did it in chapter 1, and state the range of f. Okay, so first, if we're going to, it's like completing the square with an expression. So basically, and I'm going to make it bigger, that you see better. Okay, so if you look here, you're basically just going to see it's like we take and we leave a gap here, and we move that 3 to there. And then we take that middle there, that middle number in front, okay, the b value, and we divide it by 2 and we square. And then don't forget, whatever we add, we must also subtract on that side. And now this is going to form the bracket. This is the complete square. So basically it's x, it's that sign, and then this I simplified, 2 divided 2, so it's 1 square, and then plus, so now this is 3 minus 1, and that's 2. And there you have it in the form. And the power thing of this form is that you can see the turning point now, that turning point. So how do I find that turning point? I just change the sign of this one. Do you see there? So it's becoming negative. And then I just take that one. Let's rather make it in yellow. That's becoming negative. And then I just take that. And that's the turning point. So it's always good to have a rough sketch or a sketch in mind. So there's the turning point. I know the legs is going up and it's something. And I know it cuts the y-axis there at 3. Okay, there at 3. So that is the sketch. Okay, so let's just go back to the question. So because what they love asking in this chapter, they like asking two things in one question. So they first ask, express, that's the one thing. That's what you did. It's 100% correct. But then they state the range. So I must still state the range. Now, the range will go, with the turning point, without the sketch, you can find it because you will know the leg's going up and it's going up from the number what? 2. So from the number 2. So it's going to, so that point will be included on a number line. It will look like this. Okay, so the range will be y is bigger and equal to 2. So remember, range is the y values. Domain is the x values. Okay, now find an expression for the inverse. Okay, so let's just refresh. And this is also coming from ordinary level. Okay, so I put nice the steps again to you. Now, very, very important. You can only find the inverse of a quadratic equation if it is in this form. Okay, so if it's not in this form, then you must first get it in this completing the square form before you can find the inverse. Okay, but luckily they helped you. That's usually how they do questions. They let you do it in A so that it help you in B. Okay, so I'm using that answer which I got there. Now, I make this y, fx, I make y. So replace fx with y. Then, step 2, I interchange. So where I see a y, I make it an x. And where I see a x, I make it a y. Okay. And then the next step, make y the subject of the formula. So first take the 2 over, then take the square root, plus minus, don't forget, and then take the negative. Now, remember if it's like this, okay, then it's open for both. So it's the whole quadratic, okay. But now, let's just go back. Because there was a restriction in the domain and it was at -1. So did you see what I showed you with the sketch? It was only that part. That's why I made dotted lines there. That was not included in this question. So now this is the positive side. So can I show you? So this was the positive which is not included in the question. Can I show you there? That's the positive. And the part that's included in the question is the negative. And that's why as soon as I write it in the inverse form, then I use the negative. Do you see? So don't use plus minus because the domain restricts you to the negative part. Okay, so replace, and it's because it's smaller than or equal to -1, so that's why we use the negative option. Okay, very important. Small things in functions that can cost you marks. Okay, so let's start with question number C. Solve the equation g of x equals 13. Okay, so the first thing, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. It's a composite function. So we're going to put the one function into the other one. Okay, so basically I prefer, and I want to show you, I prefer to write it down not in this form. So not in this form. I prefer to rather write it in the original form. Okay, so first write down your two functions. So there is f, just want to get a pen. there is f, and there is g. So if I must find gf, it means I must take f, the inner function, and put it into g. So I take f and I put it into g in the place of x. Okay, so basically I'm just going to write it down now. So this is basically what I did. So I 2, then I take that whole function and plus 1. And then I just multiply out. So this is 4x, this is 6 plus 1, and that's 7. But now I'm going to put it into that. So g of x equals 13. So this is equal 13. I just take it over and I factorize and I get my two solutions. So x is -3 and x is 1. But now this is very, very important. I must be 4 because it's not to say both will be a solution. I must determine the domain of this composite function. So this is very important. So in a composite function, the domain is restricted to the input, the inner function. So what is the input, the inner function? That will be f. Okay, I just want to clean here and show you. That's the inner function, the input. So I will look at what is that domain. So let's just go back to the question. And I will see that the domain of the inner function is x is smaller than equal to -1. So that's what I wrote. X is smaller than equal to -1. So basically, this x is equal to 3 will not be a solution. So the only solution will be x is equal to -3. So don't focus on this outer functions domain. Focus on the inner functions domain to decide what solutions will work. And in this case, because it's smaller than -1, x is equal to -3 will be the only solution. Take note. If you write both answers, they will penalize you. You will not get all your marks. Okay, so I want you to stop the video and I want you to try number 1. As soon as then you can continue the video, then you can check number 2. Okay, but I'm going to start with number 1. The function f is defined by this, and it's always very important to check the domain. So it's open for all real numbers. Express this in the form this plus b. Okay, so if I do this, I can let's just say, so it's negative. Let's start with a. So it's -2x squared plus 12x minus 3. So I'm going to take -2 out as a common factor. So do that first. So x squared, so I divide by -2, then I'm going to get -6x. Okay, and I always like to put that, and that's -3 divided by -2. Do you see? So it's positive 3 over 2. Okay, now I'm going to put in that plus and minus value. So take this value and divide it by 2. So plus, can keep the -6, divide 2, and you're going to square. And whatever you add, you must also subtract. -6 over 2, and you square, and you close that bracket. And that is going to give you -2, and then it's going to be x minus, okay, and now this is going to be 3, do you see, because it's going to be squared, but it's that negative. Okay, so it's going to be 3 and square, so it's that value inside. And now I'm just going to simplify this. So this is going to be 3 over 2, and this is going to be 3 times 3, so -9. Okay, and if I simplify this further, now this is going to be -2, and this is going to be, okay, let's take that bracket out. That's going to be x minus 3 squared. Now, if you simplify this, negative 9 plus 3 over 2, and you multiply with negative 2, then you are going to get positive 15. So first simplify that and then multiply that with 2. So this is negative 7.5 and then multiply negative 2 and that is going to be 15. Okay. So it's in that form. So they love asking that question in functions. Number B. State the greatest value. Now, if this is going to be the turning point, so if this is going to be now the function that's changed into that form, the turning point will be, change that value, so it's 3, and it's going to be 5. Okay, so 15, sorry. I forgot the 15 there. Maybe you picked it up. Now, this graph, now just take note of this graph. If you look at this graph, then this, because it's negative, the graph is going to, so if it's 3 and 15, say the graph is going to be like this. So there, the highest point there will be 15. Okay, but it's going down. So therefore, okay, if they say state the greatest value, then it will be y is equal to 15. Okay, it's that point there. They said they will also accept y is smaller than equal to 15, but I think they asked for the greatest, so I think this is more correct. Okay. Now, number C. Function, find the values of x for which g of x plus 1 is equal to 0. Okay, so let's just do that one. I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Okay, so basically I'm just going to find, okay, so I first want to write down my functions again. And as I said to you, I prefer you write it in the original form. So let's just write, it's going to be fx equals negative 2x squared plus 12x minus 3. Okay, and then what will be my gx? Let's say, okay, there they gave gx. I'm just going to make it another color. Gx, it's equal to 2x plus 5. Okay, so if I'm asking you to find g, let's just say I'm asking you to find g. Okay, it's actually first yellow. G, if I want to play with the colors now, fx, and then plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so it's meaning I'm going to take f, my pen, I'm going to take f, the inner function, and I'm going to throw it in there, and you must not forget to say plus 1. Okay, so basically, if I'm just going to, then it's just going to be, okay, let's just get my pen correct. So it's going to be 2, and then it's negative 2x squared plus 12x minus 3. And don't forget your plus 5. Okay, if I want, then I could have said this was, do you see? And in the place of x, I just put that function. And now I can just multiply out. So I get negative 4x squared plus 24x minus 6 plus 5. And if I simplify that, okay, and that was, I just want to see plus 5. And don't forget, I was putting it not here, equals 0, sorry. Plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so I just worked the function out, but I just complete it now by saying plus 1 equals 0. So then it's going to be negative 4 x squared plus 24x. Okay, now this is going to be 6 minus 6, which is going to be 0. Okay, now if I simplify this and I take negative 4x out as a common factor, then I'm going to get x minus 6, and that will be equal to 0. Okay, and then if I simplify, I'm just going to say negative 4x equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. So x is equal to 0 or x is equal to 6. Now, why will both be solutions? Because, remember what I said, the domain is by the inner function. Okay, but if you look at the inner function, if we go back, did you see that the inner function was open for all real numbers? Okay, and that is basically why both of them will be a solution to this question. Okay, let's do the next one. Let's start with number 2. Functions f and g are defined. This is f, so it's a straight line. X is an element of all real numbers. And this is g, and it's also real numbers, and the only thing that x cannot be 1 because then I'm going to divide by 0. So obtain expressions for f, the inverse, g, the inverse, stating the value of x for which the inverse of g is not defined. Okay, let's start with number A. Now, I first write it in the other form, which is easier to work with. Okay. Then where I see fx, I make a y. And when I see y, I make a x. And where I see x, I make a y. Then I take everything to one side. Then I divide 3. Then I'm basically having x plus 2 over 3. And now I'm just swapping the sides. And I don't forget to end with this, with the inverse notation. Okay, so that will be my first one. Now I'm going to do my second one. So let's just do gx. And that's 2x plus 3, x minus 1. Okay, so make it a y, 2x plus 3, x minus 1. Okay, and then do the swap. So where you see a y, make it a x. And where you see a x, make it a y. Okay, now cross multiply. So if I cross multiply, I get 2y plus 3 on this side. Now this side, x, y minus 1. Okay, now first multiply the bracket out. So I get 2y plus 3 equals xy minus x. Now, the best is to avoid too much negatives. So let's rather, if I take the x over and take the y's to this side, then I'm avoiding a bit too much negatives. So if I leave the 3 on this side and I bring the x over, do you see? Because I'm trying to get the y's on one side so that I can take y out as a common factor, because y must become the subject of the formula. So I take y out, and then it's x minus 2. And then I divide by x minus 2, and I divide by x minus 2, and I'm basically, I will now swap it around. This step was unnecessary. So not f minus 1, g minus 1, x equals 3 plus x over x minus 2. And now the reason why they ask you for what this invert is not defined is you cannot divide by 0. So if you say, and if you really cannot see it, so just what? It cannot be 0. So it means that x cannot be 2. So that is just say define. Let's just read the question again that you see how they say it. Stating the value of x for which is not defined. So, but x is not equal to 2. Okay, because then it's division by 0. Okay, and that's how you do it. That was the inverse. Okay, let's start with number B. Now, before I start with number B, I'm first going to, because I see it's a composite function, so I'm first going to just rewrite the functions again for myself. So it's 3x minus 2, and it's the original. It's not the inverse function, so they can do it as composite also, but in this case, it's the original functions. and it's x minus 1. Okay, and they start with the statement fgx equals 7 over 3. So now what the inner function is g. So I'm going to take g and I'm going to pour it into f in the place of x. Now just be very careful that you write the whole down. So I'm going to show you. So it's like 3 and then comes the bracket, that part, and then don't forget that negative 2. Okay, it's very common mistake that you will forget the negative 2. And then it's 7 over 3. So it's going to be 2x plus 3 over x minus 1. Now, I'm just going to do a few arrangements. This is over 1, so it's better that you put it on top. And I make separate brackets. It's just for the cross multiplying I will now do. So it's 7 over 3. First take this one over plus 2. Now, if you do that, you're going to, and as I said, I'm sometimes long in the videos because I don't want you to lose me in a step. Okay, so if you're going to simply put it over 1, make it one fraction, use your ABC, but it's going to be 13 over 3 if you simplify that. Okay, because it's, no, I want you to show you. So it's 2 1/3. So it's 2 1/3 plus that 2, so it's 4 1/3, and that's why it's 13 over 3. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to get 13 x minus 1 equals 3 times 3, it's going to be 9, 2x plus 3. And now it's going to be 13x minus 13 equals 18x plus 27. Okay, now if I simplify that, I'm going to get 13x minus 18x equals 27 plus 13. So this is going to be negative 5x, and this is going to be 40. And I divide by negative 5, and I divide negative 5, and I get, therefore, that the value of x is negative 8. Now, remember that the inner function is g. I want to repeat it. There comes a nice question where we will eliminate again. But because g was open for all real numbers, it can just not be 1. And luckily, it's negative 8. So that will be your final answer. I'm creating the video today, 20 June 2023. And I believe it's now holiday for all the learners. So if you want to go and buy a copy of the mathematics textbook y equals mx plus c, you can go and check out in the following bookshops. And it will now be a very good time to go through the first semester's work and to make sure that you are ready 100% before the next semester starts. And then also, this is more for the teachers. Just remember that all the textbooks are on the the NEET catalog. So this is also the time of the year that schools order their books, send the information in, and make sure that your learners is having a copy in front of them next year.